Yes, my hair is wet. Yes, I just took a shower like 30 minutes ago, but it's fine. We're just gonna have to roll with it. We'll be fine. It'll be okay. Don't worry about it. Kanade Yoisaki is a character from Hatsune Miku Colorful Stage. She's a member of the group Nightcord at 25 o'clock, and she acts as the lead for the group. Within the story of the game, Kanade is the songwriter and producer for N25. Today I'm going to talk about Kanade for a little bit and go over some of the significant things about her. I found her to be a very interesting character, so I want to take a closer look at her. Before we continue any further, I want to mention and clarify that I will only be going over information and story details that are currently available on the English server. I don't play on the Japanese server, so although I know there is more information over there, I'll only be focusing on what we officially have in English. If you're interested, then please stick around, and I hope you enjoy a deeper dive into Kanade Yoisaki. Kanade was an only child raised by both of her parents. In the opening for N25's main story, we learn that Kanade's mother was often very ill. Her mother had a music box that was gifted to her by her father, and Kanade absolutely loved this music box. Kanade always loved her father's music. In the opening, she describes it as gentle and heartwarming, and she says that anybody who listened to it smiled. She looked up to her father and wanted to make music just like him. Music that could make people smile. At some point, it's not specified when, Kanade's mother passed away. This left Kanade on her own with only her father, who still worked as a musician. But as time went on, her father found it harder and harder to find work, and the music he produced for his clients often turned out to be not quite what they were looking for. During N25's main story, we see that Kanade's father was pretty obsessive over his music. Although he certainly always loved making music, the way we see him in the main story's flashbacks seem pretty different from how he acts in the flashback from the Carnation Recollection event. In that flashback, he seems significantly happier, so we can assume that between then and the flashbacks in the main story, he was pretty badly devastated by the death of his wife. Because her father was so focused on music, Kanade kind of had to pick up the slack around the house with day-to-day activities. More than once, we see her tell her father that dinner is ready, which implies that she had to take up something as simple as cooking because her father was so often focused on composing. Episodes 10 and 11 of N25's main story give us a lot more insight into Kanade and her father. In episode 10, there's a flashback where Kanade shows her father a song that she wrote. He was very impressed by it and said that her mother would have loved it. At the same time, her father is also struggling with a song that he's working on, so Kanade listens to it and makes a few changes. In episode 11, there is yet another flashback. Kanade noticed her father was struggling, so she decided to write a song that might cheer him up. Her father tells her that he won a competition with the song that she helped fix in the previous episode, and that the part she wrote specifically was very popular and well-liked. She shows him the song that he wrote, and he tells her that she has a gift and has been blessed by music, and that she should never stop creating her own music. But the very next morning, disaster strikes. Kanade's father has to be rushed to the hospital due to a sudden illness. This is something that I'll discuss a little bit further in a moment. At the hospital, a doctor tells Kanade that her father's condition is due to overwork and that most people recover within a few days. However, as we see later, this was not the case with Kanade's father, whose condition lasts much longer, and the biggest problem that he faces is problems with his memory. Kanade returns home from the hospital and discovers her father's diary. His writings reveal the struggles he had with finding work and writing music that satisfied his clients. He believed his music was too outdated and no longer suited to modern wants and trends. He specifically mentions Kanade's music and how his clients often wanted music that was more similar to hers rather than to his. Having already been told that her father's condition was unlikely to improve and therefore already very upset and stressed, what Kanade sees in the diary only further traumatizes and upsets her. She begins to blame herself for what happened to her father. She believes she stole music from him and that what happened is all of her fault. She falls so far into this self-hatred and guilt that she even seems to experience suicidal thoughts, such as wondering if she can disappear if she stops eating. Then Kanade finds her mother's music box and remembers how much she loved it. She recalls her desire to write music like her father that could make people smile. She forms the belief that she must write music that can save people because of how she hurt her father. She thinks that if she can save people with her music, the damage she believes she did to her father can be undone. The incident with her father and the belief that she forms afterwards that she must write music that can save people forms the very basis and foundation of Kanade's character. Nearly everything about her directly ties back to her desire to save people. At her core, this is what Kanade is, a traumatized girl who pushes herself too far because of a burden she carries. Through flashbacks, we see the kind of person that Kanade's father was. When she was younger, she greatly admired and looked up to him. In the flashback Incarnation Recollection, we see that he was much happier in the past and was likely very devastated by the death of his wife. Kanade's entire worldview is based around the idea that she hurt her father with her music. He was stressed and overworked, which led to his current condition. However, the game itself never really specifies exactly what happened to him. The doctor at the hospital just tells Kanade that he's suffering from overwork, which is a very vague and non-specific thing to say. But it is possible to take a guess or two as to what happened to Kanade's father. The most prominent issue her father has is issues with his memory. He frequently forgets things and speaks as though he's basically living in the past, like 10 or so years of his memory have just been completely chopped off. What he does and doesn't remember isn't consistent. He can forget something one day and then remember it the next. Most cases of memory loss, especially to a degree this bad, are caused by some kind of issue with the brain. A head injury could cause memory issues, for example. A condition like dementia also comes to mind, but that's highly unlikely since the onset of Kanade's father's condition was extremely rapid, and dementia is a condition that progressively worsens over time. The doctor's statement that her father is suffering from overwork can give us a bit of a clue too. In Japan, there's a phenomenon known as karoshi, which can be translated as overwork death. Japan has a very strict work culture, which can often lead to people being stressed and overworked. This can cause a variety of issues that lead to karoshi, a sudden death often contributed to stress in the workplace. Karoshi, at its core, is about long-term unresolved stress. Stress in general is known to be linked to numerous health issues, especially when it is maintained for a very long time. It increases the risk for certain health conditions such as heart disease. The term karoshi itself refers specifically to a death from overworking, so since Kanade's father is still alive, he wouldn't count as a case of it, but it's easy to see how he almost was. Given his constant memory problems, which point towards an issue with his brain, I think it's most likely that Kanade's father suffered a stroke. Although he survived, the effects of the stroke were severe enough to pretty badly impair his memory. Even a couple years later, he's still in the hospital rather than being allowed to go home, possibly because Kanade is too young to take care of him. Forgetfulness and memory problems aren't the only issues that can arise from suffering a stroke, but the game and story never mention any other problems that Kanade's father has. Still, assuming that my conclusion about him having a stroke is correct, it's likely there's other problems that he's having that just simply aren't mentioned. Her father's sudden illness, as mentioned before, traumatized Kanade and pushed her towards an unhealthy lifestyle of becoming obsessed with composing. Kanade ends up developing a similar kind of obsession as her father. Just like him, she neglects basic needs and activities such as eating, sleeping, and household chores so she has more time to focus on music. In more ways than one, and for better or for worse, Kanade takes after her father very strongly. Although we hear about Kanade's mother during N25's main story, we don't learn a whole lot about her until the Carnation Recollection event story. During the event, we learn that her mother loved carnations, and Kanade brings some to her grave whenever she visits. Carnations specifically being mentioned is important, because the flower, particularly the white variant that we see during the event, are often seen as a symbol of motherly love. During the event, we're also shown a flashback to when Kanade visited a flower bed of carnations with her parents. She was very young at the time, and her father played his guitar. She remembers her mother saying that her father's music always made her smile, and her father also says that he's happy as long as Kanade and her mother are smiling. We can see that Kanade's mother was a very kind woman who cared about her daughter a lot. Even after her death, Kanade still remembers her fondly and treasures her music box. I also find it interesting that Kanade can still sort of feel her mother's love even though she's gone, which is a very interesting contrast to Mafuyu, who experiences no love from her mother even though she's very present in her life. That contrast could lead me on a whole tangent about comparing Kanade and Mafuyu's characters side by side, but we're not here to talk about Mafuyu, so let's just focus on Kanade instead. Sometime after the incident with her father, Kanade formed Nightcord at 25. It began with just her and Mafuyu, with Mizuki and Enna joining later on. In episode 1 of N25's main story, we see some social media posts about N25. The members are described as anonymous, so their identities are not known online. In fact, at the start of the story, the members only know each other by their online aliases. People describe N25's music as emotional and hard-hitting, but it's also noted to be comforting and not entirely full full of coldness and pain. The main story reveals quite a lot about Kanade in relation to N25 as a group. We see she holds her music to a very high standard, not considering it complete until it's basically perfect. She wants every single song she creates to be capable of saving people. Kanade sacrifices a lot in the pursuit of her music. She neglects eating and sleeping, opting for instant noodles as meals because they're quick and easy to make, and often falling asleep at her desk. Her lifestyle is incredibly unhealthy and harmful to her, and it all centers around her all-consuming obsession with composing music that can save people. At the start of N25's main story, all members of the group are anonymous to each other. Kanade only knows the other three by their aliases, Yuki, Inanen, and Amiya. Throughout the main story and event stories, as well as card side stories, she gets to know all of them better. She values each of them and what they contribute to N25, and she also has a unique relationship with them. In the Carnation Recollection event, Mizuki helps Kanade remember the time she saw the flower bed with her parents. That greatly helped Kanade in composing a new song, because it led her to realize that she wanted to make people smile, which is far less abstract than music that can save someone. Kanade is very grateful to Mizuki for helping her realize this. Additionally, Mizuki doubts that what happened to her father was really Kanade's fault, but they recognize that telling her this probably wouldn't stop her. Kanade appreciates Enna and what her art adds to N25's music. She doesn't see Enna's art as just an accessory or something that's there to make the song look nice. She believes the art is a huge part of the presentation of N25's work and that the music would be incomplete without it. And then there's Kanade's relationship with Mafuyu, which is easily the most prominent, and I could probably make an entire video on just them alone. Kanade's entire objective in the story revolves around Mafuyu and her desire to save her. Initially, this is frustrating to Mafuyu, who doesn't want to be saved. In episode 17 of the main story, Mafuyu even calls Kanade out, saying that Kanade only wants to save her because she believes it will save herself. And you know what? Mafuyu isn't wrong. There is, like I said before, a lot more that I can say on Kanade and Mafuyu's relationship, but I will save some of that for a little bit later because it ties into a massive aspect of Kanade's character. Honami is Kanade's housekeeper. She takes care of basic chores like cooking and cleaning, which Kanade can't focus on because she's composing music. Kanade also frequently turns to Honami for advice. For example, in the Imprisoned Marionette event, Kanade asks Honami what to do to help someone. Honami tells her something that I think is very important for Kanade to remember. Simply listen to the person and get to understand them more. Although she is Kanade's housekeeper, Honami seems like a very important person in her life, especially since Kanade trusts her enough to go to her for advice on these topics. Another character that Kanade seems to have a significant relationship with is Ichika. Although they currently haven't been shown together a whole lot in the English server, I still find their relationship significant enough to discuss. The first time Kanade encounters Ichika is in the Singing Among the Cherry Blossoms event. In episode 8, she hears Ichika singing in the park with Minori and Kohane. She's very impressed by Ichika's talent, and she later recognizes her voice during her performance in the Scribble Fan Festival event. Kanade and Ichika finally meet in The Warmth of Intersecting Melodies. The two run into each other at the music shop, where they're both trying to purchase the last copy of a CD from an artist they really like. Kanade lets Ichika have the CD because she's already heard most of the songs and she wants as many people to hear the artist's music as possible. Later though, she does seem genuinely upset about not getting the CD. Ichika also feels bad about taking the CD when it seemed like Kanade wanted it so much. By chance, she discovers that Mafuyu knows Kanade, so she gives the CD to Mafuyu so she can pass it along to her. Also by chance, Kanade discovers that Honami knows Ichika. Honami arranges an outing so that Kanade and Ichika can meet, and that's where their relationship starts. One similarity that seems to bring Kanade and Ichika together pretty well is how they both want to write music that's important to people. Kanade wants to save others with her music, and Ichika wants to write songs that can touch people's hearts. They have similar objectives and a shared love of music, but the obvious difference is that Kanade's goal comes from trauma and Ichika has a much more healthy view of her objective. Even though we haven't really seen much from these two yet, I still really like them. I especially enjoy the area conversations between them because they both just seem really awkward and unsure of how to talk to other people. Kanade rarely gets out of the house, and Ichika's just a very shy person in general, so their interactions are kind of funny and cute to watch. But I am looking forward to seeing what else happens with them and how their friendship evolves. A savior complex is a pattern of thinking that results in someone believing it is their responsibility to save others. Without me even explaining any further, it's already very obvious that this applies to Kanade. Her savior complex is at the core of her whole character. She feels as though she must save people with her music, otherwise her existence is meaningless. This savior complex is what Mafuyu directly calls Kanade out for towards the end of N25's main story. Mafuyu sees Kanade's attempts and desire to help her as inauthentic and hollow because it's not really about saving her. It's more about Kanade saving herself, because her entire savior complex stems from the belief that she is responsible for what happened to her father. And like I mentioned before, Mafuyu isn't wrong about this. Kanade even admits as much, that she's being selfish by trying to help Mafuyu. Obviously, simply wanting to help other people does not constitute a savior complex. Helping other people and wanting to do good things for others is a good thing. But a savior complex takes that to the extreme, causing someone to sacrifice their own time and well-being solely to help others. We see this a lot with Kanade. She either forgets or straight up neglects to eat or sleep so that she can focus on her music. She even had to hire a housekeeper to do daily chores so she had more time to focus on composing, and she takes online classes rather than going to an in-person school for the exact same reason. Simply put, Kanade's savior complex is far from healthy. If she fails to save someone, as with what happened with Mafuyu at some point, she feels awful and blames herself, thinking that she failed because she wasn't good enough. But also, if she does succeed in saving someone, that probably wouldn't help her much either, because it would only feed into her complex. Basically, saving people is not the solution to Kanade's savior complex. In order to resolve it, she would need to address the root issue, her belief that what happened to her father was her fault and that she needs to make up for it by saving others. But no matter how many people she saves, it would never ever be enough, because it's not confronting the root of the problem. Kanade is hurt and traumatized, and in order to heal from that, she would need to begin the process of realizing and understanding that she's not at fault for what happened to her father. So far in the English server, that hasn't really happened, but I really hope it does later down the line. Now I want to take some time and look at a few of Kanade's cards, because there's some that have some very cool and interesting symbolism in some of the elements. I'll start with the trained version of her initial 3-star card, Beyond the Screen. It shows Kanade standing in the empty Sekai. There's sheet music flying around her and the pages seem torn and crumpled. There's also music equipment in the background, like a synthesizer and speaker and a pair of broken headphones on the ground. She has a very sad, almost frustrated look on her face. I think the broken equipment and torn sheet music could represent her somewhat damaged relationship with music in general. She used to truly love it, but now she mostly composes because she feels responsible for what happened to her father. In the trained version of her 4-star card, Lifelike, Kanade is held up by marionette strings. She's also wearing a mask covering half of her face. The eye on the mask is closed with a single teardrop underneath it. In Mafuyu's card for the same event, we also see her held by marionette strings, which is likely meant to represent how she feels like a puppet controlled by her mother. Similarly, for Kanade, the strings might show how she feels controlled by her trauma. Everything she does is because of the guilt and shame she feels. Next is her trained 4-star From Feeling to Melody card. Kanade is standing in a field of large art supplies. Her eyes are closed and she has a bit of a sad look on her face. She's holding a sketchbook close to herself. Kanade isn't skilled with art, but we know that Enna is. I think her holding the sketchbook so close represents how she treasures Enna's art and believes it's important to N25's music. Next up is a big one, her 4-star Flower Bed of Memories card. In the untrained version, we see Kanade and Mizuki looking at the carnations. In the foreground, there are also some tulips. Carnations, especially white ones, are often used as a symbol for motherly love, which makes sense considering the Carnation Recollection event was largely about Kanade and her mother. Tulips are also seen as a symbol of love, although not necessarily motherly love specifically. In the trained version of the card, Kanade is lying on the ground. Her eyes are closed, but she's smiling. Flower petals, which I think are carnation petals, float all around her. On the ground next to her is what I think is a sheet of paper meant for a music box. She also has a figurine of two people dancing, which probably represents her parents. This is easily one of my favorite cards in the whole game, mostly just because of how beautiful it is. Then we have her 4-star What the Hanged Girl Saw. The name of the card, as well as the design of its trained version, clearly reference the Hanged Man tarot card. Most analyses I've seen done on this card reference the upright Hanged Man card, but I'm going to take a bit of a different approach and also reference the reversed Hanged Man. Given the angle that Kanade's card is drawn at, it seems more like she's upright rather than hanging upside down. Additionally, the Hanged Man card is typically drawn with the man hanging from his right foot, while Kanade is hanging from her left. The Hanged Man card in general often represents a sacrifice of some kind, because the man is assumed to be hanging of his own free will. This can easily represent Kanade's obsession with music in response to feeling like she's responsible for her father's condition. The reversed Hanged Man in particular can be taken to mean that something is at a standstill. Things aren't progressing. This could show how Kanade feels about her attempts to save Mafuyu. She keeps putting in so much time and effort and yet gets very little in return. In fact, this can be generalized across the board. Kanade expects and wants nothing in return for her efforts because she believes it's her responsibility to save people in the first place. I guess to summarize, I'll just say I think a lot of Kanade's cards are very cool and pretty and well designed, and I enjoy looking at them. Like all good characters, Kanade should experience some kind of growth and development throughout her story. We can kind of already see that happening. In the Carnation Recollection event, she remembered why her father's music was so important to her. In the Warmth of Intersecting Melodies, Kanade tells Mafuyu that she had forgotten how fun it was to hang out with friends, and because of the meeting with Ichika, she remembered that. Ultimately, the only way for Kanade to truly recover and heal from her trauma is to accept the fact that what happened to her father was not her fault. Her obsession with composing and saving people, as well as her savior complex in general, is far from healthy for her, and all it does is hurt her. I hope we see someone actually really, truly challenge Kanade's idea that she has to save people in order to right some sort of wrong she committed. It's not bad that she wants to help people, she's just going about it in a way that hurts her, but she believes she deserves that pain because of what she did to her father. I hope we see Kanade at least begin to recover from her trauma. I think she deserves to heal and learn to be happier. I wouldn't say Kanade is one of my favorite characters in the game, but as a baseline, I really truly do love all of the characters. There's not a single one that I dislike. By going through and taking a closer look at her as a character though, I've come to really appreciate Kanade a whole lot more. I think she's a very solid, interesting character. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I also hope that you love Kanade as much as I do. Feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you agree, if you disagree, if you think there's something I missed, go ahead and let me know. I want to do more videos like this, even if they do take a while to make. This took me at least a month, although granted, a lot of that was my own procrastination and laziness, but that's besides the point. So if you're interested in more of this type of content, then please like and subscribe. I'll also have a card linking to another video similar to this on Minori Hanasato and Nagito Komaeda, so go check that out if you're interested. It's still one of my favorite videos I think I've ever made. But that's about it from me for now, so I hope you have a nice day, and I will see you in the next one.